That's me.
Like they've got a halo, right? Stand in front of the window.
That's better. Yeah, that works. That's better. Yeah, we can still see your halo, but it's not as blinding. I think it's just about over to you, Mr. Chair, so I'm going to shut off my camera.
Very good. Thank you for that, Douglas. So I'd like to call the meeting to order and recognize the traditional Nuu-chah-nulth territories that we are inhabiting, and we recognize that fact, and I wish to thank everybody for that. Secondly, a notice to attendees and delegates that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube on the Regional District website. Item number 2, approval of the agenda. So I need a motion to approve, including late items required for 2/3 majority vote, which also includes a late item presented by Mr. Terry Smith with regards to their issue and Terry Smith is the chairman of the Barclay Community Forest.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda with the added delegation of Terry Smith and the Barclay Community Forest.
Thank you for that, seconder. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate that. Item number 3, the West Coast Committee meeting, January 20th, 21. And the motion is that the minutes of the West Coast Committee meeting held on January 20th, 2021 be received.
Move adoption.
Second.
Moved by Tom, seconded by Rochelle. Thank you very much. Item number 4 are petitions, delegations, and presentations. And I will remind those presenting that we have a 10-minute maximum. And if you're getting close to 10 minutes, I will let you know. Item 4A is the delegation of James Rogers, co-founder and executive director of the CARE Network, regarding an update on operations and services in the region and seeking support to amend the lease at the Long Beach Airport. Mr. Rogers. I'm not getting anything from Mr. Rogers. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay, sorry. There we go. Does that sound better?
Yep.
Okay, sorry about that, everybody. Hi, yeah, it's James out at Long Beach Airport here with the CARE Network. And we've been out here for, I guess, just about 2 years now. So just wanted to give a quick update of where things are at and where things are going. Just by way of introduction, we are currently providing essential animal-related services across the region, pretty much from Ahousaht to Makoa at this point, and everywhere in between. And those services include helping with stray animals, spay, neuter, and vaccination support for animals and population control. We help with dangerous dog situations. And we also have an animal emergency response service. And now that we have the lease here at the airport, we have a temporary animal sheltering service that we provide. Just want to sort of recap, we don't have any other services out here. The BCSPCA services essentially stop at Port Alberni. So we are the animal response and rescue service and sheltering service for the coastal communities. We started in 2012. We're volunteer based, and of course focused on community health and safety, and again step in when any animals are injured or otherwise in need. The operation at the shelter is coming along nicely. We're still solar powered, 100% solar powered. We are able to house some animals right now, but it's all very temporary. The long-term vision here is to set up our base of operations, hopefully in what we believe was the officers' mess out here at the airport when it was the air base. And that building is currently sort of right next to us and off limits for it's got asbestos and some other issues, I think. So about a year ago, we submitted a proposal to the West Coast Committee, starting to explore the idea of us taking over that building, the responsibility of that building, to again make that our base of operations. And so really just wanted to sort of bring that back up again a year later, hoping to make some headway on that early this year. We did have an offer of a donated new roof for the building sometime over the last 2020. I don't think that's still available, but it's opportunities like that that we'd like to be able to take advantage of should they come up, and therefore, would like to extend our lease to that building so that we can essentially rehabilitate it to make it useful again. We appreciate that there's a lot to do to make it workable, and my understanding is staff, ACRD staff, are working on an engineer's report of some sort that will help us determine the extent of things. We have had some contractors give us some quotes, so we have a rough idea of what's required. But again, just wanted to put it on your radar again, that is our intention, to start chipping away at, again, if granted that lease extension, to start working on that building and save it before it starts collapsing into the ground. It does have a leaky roof, and there is extensive damage, so time is of the essence for that one. With that would be, and even without that, I suppose, is we are looking to get services set up out at this location. So currently we're not on the sewer system, as the one that was connected to the old building is defunct. So again, chatting with staff about getting a sewer line put in, water line, and working with BC Hydro on getting power out here. And with that, we'll be able to, really get our operations up and running. 2020 was a really hard year for us, as I think for everybody. COVID hit us pretty hard in that we had more cases than ever, and fewer volunteers and fewer fundraising opportunities. So as a nonprofit that's considered an essential service, at an essential time, we were really pressed. I think our numbers for last year were certainly over 700 animal cases for a small group. So again, we're hoping to get West Coast Committee's support in the near future with taking over the officers' mess building, rehabilitating it, and eventually what we'd really like to see is a longer term lease, which I appreciate isn't necessarily possible right now, but we need to be able to amortize the investment in that building over a longer period of time. And currently we're on, I think as everyone is out here, a short-term lease, which is working just fine right now. But for us to really invest in staying here or continue to invest, because we have actually started to work with Heritage BC on a statement of significance for this building, as well as a conservation plan, which we received a matching grant to do. So we have started that investment just to see what's possible. I'll leave it there. And if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Go ahead, Tom. Sorry, Tom, you're muted.
There we go. Thanks. Thanks, James. It's Tom here. I just had a quick question. Essentially, what you're asking for today is a for support for the long-term sort of looking at that officer's mess and the support services that would be needed for that. Is that essentially what you're asking for today, James?
Yeah, today was sort of an update and a maybe a request for support going forward as things come together. You know, as we receive reports from staff, we'll be formalizing proposals and stuff. But yeah, just looking for your support with this vision of us really getting things more sustainable out here, so we can continue the services we provide.
Right. Okay. So that support would look. In what way would you see that support at this stage? A letter or a recommendation forward, or what do you see at this point? Or just is this just more for information at this point? You'll come back at a later time with something a little more comprehensive.
Yeah, more about information only at this point, and a sort of a heads up that you'll probably be seeing a proposal from us that we would be requesting the West Coast Committee support for an amended lease to include the officer's mess and, you know, perhaps a few other details in the hopefully not too distant future. We're just waiting on staff, ACRD staff, to get a few things to us so that we can formalize all that.
Great. Thanks, James.
Thanks, Tom.
Mr. Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm certainly not trying to dissuade necessarily the committee providing a sort of support in principle piece to this. I'm thinking about our asset management report with respect to these facilities and how most of them are going to need an awful lot of work. And I'm just thinking that if as Mr. Rogers suggests, this is going to come back to the committee with a very specific request, I think that the best course of action would be really to base the conversation, the committee's deliberations, on the substance of what is actually in front of them. I do know that some of these amenities are going to be pretty cash hungry, et cetera, and we do have limited ability to raise taxation, et cetera. So anyway, I think an exchange of factual information ahead of this conversation might benefit the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Go ahead, Rochelle.
So I just want to back up a little bit to a greater scope, because maybe I'm probably forgotten if I knew ever at all the umbrella of, because there was a mention of dangerous animals or such. I'm wondering what happens in the ACRD or Area C as far as incidents with, because there's been some incidents lately that several people have come to me. Actually, Cal, I probably sent them your way because I didn't have the answer to what happens in these incidents. I guess maybe they do end up in care, but who manages reports, or where do they report to? How does it get to the next stage? Who's responsible for taking complaints or such in these natures for how the animals then get to help and be held or whatever?
So I don't have the answer for that. I would suspect that calls go through to the RCMP if it's a wild or dangerous animal, and then it goes to the conservation officers in the region. Other than that, I would expect that Mr. Rogers, the Care Network, probably gets calls. As he said, they've had some 700 calls in the last year. So yeah, that's as much as I know on that.
I actually was referring to dangerous dogs, like domestic animals, and issues that would normally be taken care of by bylaw in Ucluelet. When reported to District of Ucluelet, these instances outside of the district staff sort of kind of went and didn't give other information, which I would like to maybe provide them with in future if there was a proper process. Sorry. Thanks.
Yeah, if I could jump in for a second, it's James again. It depends on where things are happening, of course. We do receive a lot of the calls. And in some cases, if it's on, for instance, treaty land, say the Ucluelet treaty land, we actually work to enforce the animal related regulations to their Peace and Safety Act, as we work with some of the communities to help enforce their animal related bylaws. So often what will happen is calls will make their way either from the folks involved or, other people reporting the stuff. The calls will come into us, and then we can typically facilitate where they need to go, whether that's the BCSPCA has a hotline for abuse and neglect situations, and the special constables are service the province, which is different than the staff at the branch level. So they come into play at some point. As Cal mentioned, the RCMP are also a possible resource, but by and large, out here in those regions that aren't don't have bylaws or regulations or acts and regulations, we still do respond, but we just don't necessarily have the same jurisdictional controls in those places.
Thank you for that. Terry? Terry Fong, go ahead.
Just wanted to advise, so Long Beach does not have an animal control bylaw with the regional district. Some of our other electoral areas, Sprout Lake, Cherry Creek, and Beaver Creek do, but we do not have an animal control. So our bylaw officer, it's not under their jurisdiction for the Long Beach area. So I think the calls are probably redirected to the RCMP or other options if someone phones in.
Thanks, Terry. Rochelle, go ahead.
Sorry, I don't want to get off into the weeds, but how do we then make that happen? This particular incident was at Waya Point, so I think then maybe that might be directed to CARE and go through, because that's a nation. But how do we then, because there are a lot of dogs in Millstream and a lot of dogs, like there probably should be something. So how do we get to become one of those regions that actually has coverage and animal control stuff?
If I again, sorry, James, if I could just throw in, we would be happy to chat with your team about providing such services. We do have, I didn't expect to go to bylaw school, but I did. So we can actually enforce bylaws, and we've worked with all the most of the communities out here to either establish or amend, update bylaws. So that's certainly a service we can provide. With specifics to the Waya Point situation, that was treaty land and under our jurisdiction by way of our contract with the Pulilfet government.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions? Rochelle?
So then, sorry, just to close the loop on this topic that I added to the topic we're dealing with, how do we then, can we recommend that it be brought to the ACRD to have a possible bylaw report, or how we can go about getting one? Can I make some sort of a motion to that point before we deal with the, now that I've muddied it and brought something else into it, before we deal with the rest of it?
Mr. Holmes?
Well, I think I think what Terry was about to say is it becomes a matter of really, there's two parts to it, is creating the regulatory bylaw that Mr. Rogers has referenced. So, and creating a service in order to raise the taxation to, if the model were to hire the CARE network to enforce the bylaw, raise the funds to compensate them for that, and also to establish whatever regulatory environment that the board thought was appropriate. So it'd be researching those two items and the board going through the process, and then there would be some public process in order to authorize the taxation, given there would be probably no capital costs, and probably that a relatively low taxation limit in the scheme of things. And an alternative approval process would be available to the board if it wanted to use that instead of a referendum, but either could do it. This isn't the type of service probably that a petition would work well for, because it would take an awful lot of signatures to reach the 50% thresholds for both value of properties and population. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks for that, Douglas. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none. Thanks, James. We do appreciate your your comments and all of the other conversations. We'll deal with this at a later date, I'm sure. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
The next item is item B. And here we have Chloe Dubois, President, Ocean Legacy Foundation, and Elise Hoyland, Youth Coordinator and Beach Clean Lead, Surfrider Pacific Rim, regarding an update on the Ocean Legacy Ocean Plastic Depot and at the West Coast landfill. Go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us this morning and your interest in the Ocean Plastic Depot. We've prepared a small presentation that, if it's all right with you, Mr. Chair, I'll just share my screen. Okay.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, oops. All right. So my name is Chloe Dubois, and I'm the co-founder and president of the Ocean Legacy Foundation. And I'll be presenting this morning along with Alice. Alice, do you want to present who you are?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Good to see you all again. So my name is Alice Hoyland, and yeah, I am the youth coordinator and the Lovey Beach Clean lead for Surfrider Pacific Rim.
Right on. So what we'd like to talk to you about today, just to give a quick recap of our presentation, we'll be going over the background of our project, going over our sorting guide and the materials that we are now piloting to accept through this recycling program. And then Alice will jump into the importance of this depot for the community, as well as a little bit about Surfrider Pacific Rim and how they'll be distributing this program through a membership option throughout the community. And then we'll be finishing off with end-of-life processing and what happens to these materials once they reach our facility, as well as looking into next steps and long-term vision of the project. So I'll just get started here. So this project was created in partnership with the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, Surfrider Pacific Rim, as well as support from Barry and Vale Contracting at the West Coast landfill. We've now established 2 depots, in the first of their kind really in Canada and throughout the province of British Columbia. So we've got 1 depot established now with the ACRD, and we've also piloted another depot up in the Cathet Regional District within Powell River. We're focusing on 4 primary material types. So we're looking really at collecting and diverting ropes and netting, which are made out of polypropylene, high density polyethylene. We're also looking at collecting expanded polystyrene materials, as well as large billets and other items, large floats that are made from the same materials. And then our 4th category is buoys, floats, traps, and baskets. This program was designed and implemented in 2020 of last year with the goal to divert plastics from landfill that have been collected from shoreline and ocean cleanup, as well as working with the marine industry to collect and really source where a lot of these materials are being stored historically in yards or in forest environments. So our goal for the next 16 months really is to divert from landfill about 150 tons of ropes and mixed materials, as well as divert about 400 cubic yards of polystyrene that would otherwise be getting buried in the West Coast landfill. So this is what the depot looks like there at the West Coast landfill within the ACRD. So it's now been constructed and completed. And you can see here, it's designed basically as a horseshoe shape with 3 shipping containers. And inside this space, we basically have magnet signs that stick to the containers that go over our 4 sort of house categories, but then go into our subcategories. So I'll jump into that here. So I'll just move this. So basically you can see here, this is our sorting guide that we've been providing publicly. We've now divided those 4 house categories into 10 subcategories. So you can see here with the images on the 3rd image to the right, we've got oyster baskets and crab pots that we're collecting, hard plastic floats, We're also collecting PET beverage containers from cleanup specifically, rope, tires with styrofoam in the center. Up until now, these have just been going to landfill or getting stored in yards. Foam floats. We're looking at separating the broken baskets. So those will get recycled, and what can get repurposed and reused, we will do so. Another subcategory, we're looking at collecting the hard plastic fragments, the netting, barrels, and then the general foam, expanded polystyrene materials. What we are training right now, the Surfrider and Ocean Legacy just started filming our first sort of community sorting video to help people that are going to be using the depot to do so efficiently and effectively, so that they're maintaining our contamination standards. So that video will be made available publicly, most likely on YouTube or through a social media channel that'll be made available once it's ready. Alice, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, thanks, Chloe. So just really briefly wanted to touch on why this is important for our community specifically. I think that for any of us that have walked the beach in the winter, we know why this is a needed service in this area. We have a lot of marine debris washing onto our shorelines. Surfrider Pacific Rim, as one organization, has removed 50 tons of marine debris from the shorelines of the Pacific Rim in the last 5 years. So we definitely have a marine debris epidemic that we're living through on the West Coast here. And, you know, as a place where we have hundreds of thousands of visitors that come out here to experience this beautiful place annually, it's in our interest to keep it clean. Not just for that, but also for, you know, future generations and keeping our ecosystems healthy, right? So having this recycling option available is huge, allowing us to retain as much possible value from this material that's kind of washing on our shorelines as we possibly can. Oh, can you go forward a slide for us, Chloe? Thanks. Yeah, so since 2016, we've had more than 2,500 volunteers come out on shoreline cleanup with us. We are really a community that cares about this issue. It's made clear, even in the last year when we weren't able to do as many official organized cleanups and gather people together on the beach, we launched a citizen science program through the Marine Debris Tracker app. And we've already had 46 individuals and businesses from West Coast communities sign up and record data via that app. Just evidence that people are going out on their own to do solo beach cleans, even though we can't do organized cleanup right now. It's still happening. People are still going out there. And so having somewhere to divert all of this debris that we're collecting is huge. You can see at the bottom bullet point there, 22.5 thousand items have been recorded since April 2020. So that's 22.5 thousand items that have been removed from shorelines and taken out of the ocean on the Pac Rim since April last year, which is pretty cool. So yeah, and looking forward this year particularly, there are a few different cleanup groups on the West Coast here that have applied for funding to do even more remote shoreline cleanup. We know that the remote cleanups are the ones that bring in the most debris, and we're looking at a very busy summer for remote cleanup this summer, not just with Surfrider, but with other nonprofit organizations on the coast as well. So having a place where we can adequately sort in order to ensure maximum recyclability of these materials is going to be huge. There's also opportunities for job creation through that funding as well. And then the last bullet point there, the end of life options for hard to recycle materials, things like polystyrene that we don't have an option for locally, which is the biggest polluter that we have on our coast. Again, this is going to be massive for diverting that polystyrene from our landfill. Really excited to see that happen. Can we skip to the next slide there, Chloe? Thanks so much. So just a little bit about how we're going to manage this, manage the intake and kind of make it work. So the idea is to have a membership card that will be managed through Surfrider. Through the initial pilot part of this program, we're just going to start with a half dozen members until we're used to our intake and used to managing, you know, how we can manage the materials and how much we can take up once. The benefit of having a membership system is that we can ensure that everyone that is a member is fully trained in order to, minimize the contamination of load, make sure that everything is sorted properly. It also allows us to make sure that the data is being adequately collected. And that is probably the most important part of doing cleanup, right? Like, we need the data. The more we understand in terms of what's polluting our coastline, where it's coming from, the types of materials we're pulling in, the better we understand the problem and the more equipped we are to deal with those issues at the root, right? So the more that we understand, the better we can make changes on a systemic level to prevent pollution in the first place. So gathering data is key, and having members that are trained and understand the importance of data collection will be really, really valuable in that sense as well. And it also makes sure that the people that are going out there in their free time to clean the coastlines as volunteers, to remove debris that isn't theirs, won't be charged for this service. We think that's really important. We know that there's precedent for that within the ACRD as well, in terms of the cleanup waiver form that can be done so that people aren't charged tipping fees. Exactly the same idea that we want to apply to the depot here. We don't think that people that are volunteering should be charged for cleaning up other people's mess. Thanks, Chloe.
No problem. Okay. Thanks, Alice. So with this program now, and what a huge challenge has been for our group, I mean, Ocean Legacy does cleanups as well, is really what happens to all these materials once they're collected. And this is really what stimulated the development of this center, was just seeing the volume of waste coming in from cleanup and seeing that just getting buried in the landfill. So this program and infrastructure is really targeted towards diverting as much waste as possible from that landfill. And this is essentially just a small kind of snippet of what happens to some of the items once they've gone through the depot program, and then they're coming to our facility. So I'm not sure if you can see my mouse here, but we get things like Canmore floats, these massive floats that are made out of, 4 or 5 different items of resin types, and they're not designed to be dismantled or recycled. So we're really trying to work with those hard to recycle items. So they come to us, we dismantle them now, and then recycle each component separately, either in-house or with partner recyclers. So this is an example of a Canmore float here. Underneath, we can see some of the netting that comes in. So we've also been accepting netting and rope. And right next to it, you can see this is sort of what an extruded bit of netting looks like. So once we get materials on our end, we dismantle them if needed, and then we size reduce them. So we have shredding equipment, granulating equipment, and then extrusion equipment. So this is basically, once it's extruded, what it looks like. Up top here, you can see the process. So a Canmore float will come in, get dismantled, and this is our new extrusion line that we've just started setting up and commissioning. So you can see throughout the end here, these long kind of looking spaghetti lines. And this is actually this Canmore float now processed and on its way to becoming pelletized. I'm just going to move this. So this is what the pellets look like when they are coming out in the final process. So this is actually our first batch ever of ocean plastic that we've made from Canmore floats from Tofino. And essentially, these pellets are a tool and a way, a pragmatic way for people to participate in the circular economy in the ACRD. Up until now, I mean, most of this material was heading to landfill, as I was saying, and this is a way for then these materials to get captured, processed, and then re-entered back into a closed loop system for further manufacturing. So not only does it support local sources of recycled content, but it really helps us gain practical tools for our coastal communities to recycle and participate in the plastic circular economy. So, are we done? Okay, I'll just wrap up here.
Thank you.
This image underneath here, this is just an example of what oyster baskets look like once they're pelletized as well. And then just last slide. So the next steps, we're looking, basically this depot in the ACRD is the first of its kind. We're using this as a model for other regional districts to expand into. So some future prospects for us potentially are to expand additional depots into the Comox Valley Regional District, potentially working with the Mount Waddington Regional District, as well as areas up in Prince Rupert. And just quickly, we are looking now at launching at the end of this month with the ACRD, launching the press release and the public announcement for the opening of this depot at the end of March. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Oh, I see Rochelle.
Chloe,
ahead.
can you tell me from the big, sorry, I forgot the name of the big float thing that is turned into your first batch of, not nurdles or whatever you're calling them.
Yep.
Can you tell me the volume that it started out as to the volume when it gets into those, like the sheer size of it is, obviously it's a lot smaller.
We haven't done like just one. I can get back to you with that. Yeah.
It's not, I was just curious. It must be, I would assume it's a lot smaller as far as to then transport and to deal with it would be a lot.
So normally those can be just over 1 cubic meter cubic meter. So like a big super sack worth. They're usually like about 1.5 worth of those super sacks in volume. And then when it comes out, I think we filled that garbage can. So, or less. So.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Tom?
Great. Thank you. Would it be possible to take the screen share off at this point?
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chloe and Alice. I just want a quick shout out. My son is the youth and to Alice there. He said, basically said you're awesome and the work you guys do. He's the youth president of the Surf Rider at Ucluelet Secondary School. So there is strong local support for the work you guys are doing. The one thing that I am very curious about and would like to support even further is addressing those upstream causes that are often, if we can start addressing those, in a sense, it'd put you guys out of work, but that's what we're shooting for in the end. And I really appreciate the work that is moving forward in that regard. So just a big shout out in that there is a lot of community love for what's going on here, and keep on trucking.
Thanks
for those.
You can tell Seth that we think he's great too.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Chloe and Elise. Are there any other comments or questions? Go ahead, Chloe.
Yeah, just to respond a little bit to what Tom just said. So this is another reason why the depot was created, because I totally agree. We need mitigative policy and redesign on a lot of the products that are being produced to avoid this pollution from occurring. But the depots that are being created provide a solution, at least for the marine industry. So the gear and the equipment and all the rope that, I mean, there is really no solution for at this present moment. Instead of being left, along shorelines and in forests and yards, like this is a spot now where they can bring, at least the rope to start. And then we're going to look at expanding into other items. So hopefully it's an incentive for people to, not pollute and bring in and utilize the depot really as a tool to keep these shorelines cleaner.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, Chloe. I appreciate that. And within the aquaculture industry, I know specifically, especially the oyster farming, that this is going to be, I think, a substantially important commodity to have in the community, because as you say, there is nothing for that now. It is something that is out there. This is the upstream cause of it is part of the industry in general, and they were looking for solutions to that, because a lot of them are very environmentally conscious, and we're having some issues internally with not having that ability to do exactly what you guys are doing. So I didn't want to dissuade from that, the important service that you're providing. I just wanted to encourage even more that we work on those upstream causes that are outside of the control. But thank you very much.
Thanks, Chloe, and thanks, Elise. Great presentation. Thank you. Moving on, Finally, we have a late item from Mr. Terry Smith, the chairman of the Barclay Community Forest Corporation. If you'd like to make your presentation, Terry, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. Thank you for accepting my late application. I just received it last night, so I'm afraid short notice didn't give me a long time to prepare this. So even though we're short on details, I hope it will be enough to initiate a discussion about the proposal. So the community forest was looking into removing a piece of land from their tenure to establish a tree farm license for Christmas trees. When the suggestion was made that we should see if the Tofino Airport approaches could be made available for a Christmas tree farm, perhaps run by a local nonprofit group and supported by the community forest. So we're looking at providing trees, the expertise, whatever help is needed to get something like this up and running. And it perhaps is a win-win opportunity to, so we don't have to remove land from the community forest to establish this. And perhaps since the airport does do clearing at intervals on the approaches, that maybe this would be a way of saving some money there too. So I'm not really up to date on this as much as I should be to make this presentation, but because of the lateness of it, Rochelle may be able to provide more input because she has spoken to Mark Fortune about it. Sure, it's very little to go on, but
If
thank
I
you.
can, Cal, I just would to make a few comments. So that's all good.
Yeah, go ahead.
So it has been a desire from some of us on New Coolidge Council to Christmas trees and sort of a feel-good project, and something that is homegrown West Coast would be something of interest. And like Mr. Smith, who I will, I don't know if I have to say it, but just so everybody's aware, because I know Mr. Steer said something about his son last time we met, just to not be in conflict. Terry Smith is my husband's father. So just to say that out loud. I haven't had as much conversation with Mr. Smith as I have with Mr. Fortune. I did spend some time with him out at the airport in the last couple of weeks. And the idea is that it would be a win-win-win. There are several things that come to the forefront as points of thought. And one is that there could be grander schemes at the airport down the road in the next decade or two. There could be other opportunities and other leased lands. There's been a lot cleared out there, and I went out and took a look at it with Mark. And however, if we, so that's one concern, is that we don't want to utilize land that could be of revenue-based land, because we're not going to make a bunch of money on Christmas trees. That's not the point of it. And that there would need to be boots on the ground, i.e. volunteers in some shape of either a society, or I don't know if it's, if you thought of Cubs, or if you thought of, but somebody with a skill base that would be committed to, for the 4, 5, or 6 years that it takes to grow Christmas trees. They need to be, they need some love, and they need to be pruned, etc., over the duration. And it would be that sort of length of commitment. And then it would have to be done right for those years and then dealt with, because after that, then they become big trees that then have to be dealt with in a different manner. So there was that point of view. And then also it needs to be managed. And Terry can probably speak up on these next topics, but I'm under the understanding that the Barclay Community Forest can provide the trees, i.e. these little guys that you put in the ground that somebody else loves for 5 or 6 years. And then that perhaps even the Barclay Community Forest, in some way, shape, or form, the management could oversee the people with the commitment and desire to grow these little trees into Christmas trees that then we could somehow enjoy in the communities. to me, it's just one of those things that would be a collaborative feel good if it's there and we can do it, and it's not a huge cost burden, and it's just a win-win-win. I don't know how else to explain it, but I think collaboration and working together, and it's sort of a simple side thing that can't fall off the edge of someone's desk because it actually needs the commitment to make it proper, and that it doesn't take away from any other projects that are looming or in the background or would be of a greater financial benefit and contribution to the West Coast. So having said all that, I don't have all the answers, but I think that was part of the idea, is that we sort of were sourcing out how everybody felt about it, and if we could start a conversation about if we could do something, an alternative to the typical forestry that the Barclay Community Forest is doing, and with our neighbors, and that if we could just do something a little bit different.
Thank you. I appreciate those comments. I see Jenny online there. Jenny, do you have a comment?
Yeah, so through the chair, we can work through this as we do with all other proposals for airport lands. And usually what that is staff will connect up with the representative, whoever that is, and we will basically put together a written, or the proponent, if it's Mr. Smith in this case, would put together a proposal, and then staff would help them answer a lot of the questions we might have. Director Cole mentioned the cost that might be associated, the staff time, the location, access. There's an innumerable number of things that we'd have to look at, but we will look at them and flesh them out and see if this is going to make sense. And then once we've got the details together, we can bring that to the West Coast Committee as a proposal to consider as far as a use for land.
Yeah, thank you for that. Are there any other comments or questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Terry, for that, and for your comments, Rochelle. And I don't know if you're in conflict of interest or not, but I don't think so. Anyway, thanks for that. I appreciate it. Thanks, Terry.
Thank you very much for hearing me.
You're very welcome. Moving on, the next item 5, request for decisions and bylaws. There's a request for a decision with the Long Beach Airport lease rates and airport maintenance charges. I don't know if it's going to be Jenny or Mark who's going to talk to this, but please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll speak to this one. So as the report details, we have a significant amount of infrastructure costs that was basically detailed out in our asset management plan when we looked at the Long Beach Airport. Almost $50 million worth of infrastructure that we need to be able to manage. And when we've been very successful with getting grant money to support doing a lot of replacement and renewal. However, even with those grants, we do have to provide some matching funding for a lot of that grant program. So whether we pay for some of it or all of it, we do have to raise money for these for this infrastructure. When we were doing the financial plan, it became clear that we're starting to have to defer a lot of capital projects that need to happen at the airport. And so we need to look at some funding mechanisms because the alternative is to increase the tax requisition. So we'd like to take this year to look at all sorts of different funding mechanisms. We have some that we use right now, which is leases. We do have some fees that we charge for water, but typically those actually just pay for the water system themselves. We were looking to do a lease rate review and assessment this year, but because of COVID and talking with other airports, it's not a great year to be doing a market assessment. We don't know if it's going to come back with being very accurate or if it'll have much staying power. So we'd like to defer doing that for 1 year until the market is stabilized again, and then we'll have a new assessment, which should be able to last us yet another 5 years, and then we can just do the CPI increases in between. However, we did want to just touch base and see how we're doing. And the only way we can really do that at this point is to call other airports and do an informal review to see where we fall in the lease rates. And when talking to other airports, the Long Beach Airport is very unique. So we did find that the rates were on the higher side, not as high as Victoria per se, but on the higher side. However, when we're looking at places like Campbell River, Nanaimo, even Port Alberni, The difference is that there's an abundance of industrial lands available in those areas, and we're very limited on the West Coast. So when we do our market assessment, it needs to be quite a local review. But the one thing that did come out of this sort of informal research was that a lot of airports actually use something called an airport maintenance charge. And the intent is to fund that infrastructure, like the roads, the water, the sewer replacement, and all of that infrastructure. And so the money that's raised through a charge like that basically goes into the capital reserve fund. And so the rates are typically 0.25, so 25 cents per square meter. And some other airports use flat rates. So we've looked at that and are proposing that we implement such a charge at the Long Beach Airport, because it will help very much to fund the infrastructure, which supports the use of the properties at the airport. The impacts at the airport is, for the most part, the majority of tenants will see a cost of about $300 a year, $25 a month. And so they'll be submitting that price. We'll be putting it into the capital program for them or for us. And that is going to result in about $9,000 worth of fees per year, which will help us fund those. We have provided some alternatives. We're suggesting that we do a rate implementation, if this is supported by the committee and the board, that we would implement the rate mid-year so that it's only half the amount that they would pay for the 2021 year. And we've provided alternatives, which is that we could not implement the rate until 2022, or we could look at a lower rate. So we're suggesting that we set the rate at 25 cents per square meter with a minimum rate of $300, so that there's somewhat equity for the properties since they all receive the benefits of the infrastructure. And then also the not-for-profits, which have varying different rates for different reasons, including the water airstrip, which provides a benefit of health, as well as any future agriculture or silviculture would be set at a different rate, which would again just be $300, because 25 cents per square meter could end up being very costly for those. So we've looked at the rates, and we think that we've established a relatively fair system, and we're asking the committee to support moving forward with that.
Thank you, Jenny. Comments? Mr. Steer.
Great, thank you, Chair. Jenny, thank you very much for the report. And it's clearly we need to support the upcoming infrastructure of having $50 million worth of assets out there. And I want to commend staff. Historically, the amount of grants that you have brought in for some fairly large infrastructure projects out there is outstanding, and the amount of leveraging that we can do through the ACRD. It's also, as we know with granting, that it is one of those sources of income that we go like this, and we hope for the best. And as we found out with the month extension at the other end, that we're not often successful. So I do appreciate also the looking at those alternative forms of financing for this. And one of the things that I would be curious about in terms of those revenues and being contributed to the capital reserves is if we can start maybe thinking more about what might be the appropriate levels of contribution to those reserves, to be looking at those asset management questions down the road. And I know we're struggling this at the district in understanding what would be the appropriate levels to contribute to those capital reserves, so that we're not looking at, potentially large borrowing costs, et cetera, et cetera. And so I know that's something that's through the asset management program is a big task. But I do think it would be important to at least have a bit of an understanding about what would those appropriate levels of contributions to those capital reserves would be, and it may adjust what those fees may look like going down the road. But as it stands, I do support the recommendations, and I do commend staff on looking at those alternative revenue sources for those asset management questions down the road. Thank you, Jenny.
Any other questions or comments? I have a question, Jenny, and that is, we're calling this an airport maintenance charge. Is this very similar to an airport improvement charge, or is it different?
My understanding is that the term airport improvement fee was a term that was used quite a while back. And the reason I chose airport maintenance charge is that it's more standardized as far as terminology in other airports, but some do call it an airport improvement fee. And I think that also there's a bit of challenges recently with that terminology. Say when people go to Vancouver Airport and you see on your ticket, there's an airport improvement fee charge. And so I think it was the use of the airport maintenance charge is to more speak to the overall infrastructure on the entire airport lands and the maintenance of maintaining those. I think both would have been applicable, but we've chosen the airport maintenance charge.
Very good. Thank you for that. Go ahead, Rochelle.
I'm wondering if an airport maintenance fee isn't appropriate also if it involves things like beautification of the actual structure and maybe artwork and just things that if we're starting to, you know, I don't know. I just, for people who are coming to the West Coast and it's the first thing that you come into and to locate territory and just all the things, I'm wondering if there is anybody has thought about beautification. I'm just, might be the cold meds. I'm just thinking.
I appreciate that. Because this is going to be directed at our infrastructure renewal and replacement, that was not the intention for the fee. We want to sort of deal with the meat and potatoes, although I know airport staff do work hard to make things look very clean and lovely, and probably paving the road would be the first step to beautification, which is also infrastructure there.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jenny. So do I have a motion to support this request for decision?
There is. Do you
Tom?
want me to read it out, Cal? Yeah.
Sure, that's fine.
Yeah. That the West Coast Committee recommend that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors approve the updating of bylaw R1016-4 Tofino Ucluelet airport fees to include airport maintenance charges, 25 cents per cubic meter with a minimum rate of $300 and a flat rate of $300 for registered nonprofits, water landing strip operators, silviculture and agricultural activities effective June 1st, 2021.
Second.
Thank you, Kirsten. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much for that. Next item up is 5B, request for decision with regards to the Long Beach Airport 2021 lease renewals. And is Mark going to talk to, oh, Jenny, there you are. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the past, I know you guys have received a lot of reports as we renew each and every renewal for leases that comes up. This year, we're actually just trying to be more efficient. So what you're seeing in front of you is 8 leases that will be renewed this year for the Long Beach Airport. These are all leases that have been established and they're just coming up for renewal. As we always do, we use the most up-to-date, we have a very up-to-date template that we're going to be using, which is attached, but we haven't provided the details in specifically for these leases because they're renewals. If you have any questions about any of them in particular, we'd be happy to answer them.
Questions or comments? I have a question, Jenny, with regards to item number 4 in that list, Devon Transport, aka budget car rental. I don't know if we should discuss it here or in camera at a later date. I understand that, oh, I won't even go there at this point. Anyway, I don't have any other further issues. Do I have a request for, I have a request for a motion. Anybody? Go ahead, Rochelle.
I'm not going to make the motion, but do you want to remove number 4 from the motion and not move them as a whole and then have a discussion later?
I think that would be appropriate.
So I will move with the exemption of number 4, that the West Coast Committee recommends that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional Board of Directors approve the following lease renewals at the Long Beach Airport 2021, and that we have further discussion at the appropriate time for number 4.
Do I have a seconder on that?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. And thanks for that, Jenny. I appreciate all the work that's gone into this. I know that between you and Mark and other staff members, it's been a long process. Tom, you had your hand up.
No, I was just wondering when that item for the number 4 that was exempted, when that might come back forward, if there was how we would address that.
Can we add it as last minute agenda items in a closed meeting?
Yeah, I'm in favor of that. I know, Jenny, can we do that?
Wendy is online, so she can probably confirm that,
Okay.
but that'll be a problem. We can just add it as a late agenda item on the in-camera agenda at the end.
Yes, we can do that. I'll just have to check our reasons so I can report that at the end of the meeting. Thanks.
Thanks for that. Item 5C, request for a decision with regards to Long Beach Airport short-term lease, the Coastal Hive. Go ahead, Jenny.
Yes, so about a year ago, the Coastal Hive, Louise Rogers and Dion Olin presented to the West Coast Committee, and they had a proposal to do a 10-year lease for a greenhouse project at the airport lands, and have been working with staff since then to work out the details, as we do. And what they've found in working through the costs associated with the servicing and financing and a lot of challenges is that for their project to be successful, they felt that it would be better if they scaled it back and sort of did a staged approach, which I think is prudent and smart on their part. And so what they're looking for right now is a 3-year short-term lease for a property. They're going to be off-grid and start with 2 Caterpillar tunnels. And basically once they get up and running, then they can look at expanding their greenhouse to, I think, up to 6 Caterpillar tunnels. And they have ambitions of producing fresh produce for over 2,000 people on the West Coast, which is fantastic. So staff support their proposal, and we looked at a rate for their use, which is unique to what we have on the site. And so we've basically used the D&D lease lot as a comparative rate, and we're suggesting a lease rate of $1,398 a year, which they find is acceptable for their proposal. It should work for them to be successful.
Thank you, Jenny. Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, Jenny. Once again, I want to commend staff on supporting this initiative. Instead of finding barriers, you guys find solutions, and I want to really commend you on this. If you'd like, I can make the motion unless anybody has another comment.
Go ahead, Tom.
Sure. That the West Coast Committee recommend to the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District approve entering into a 3-year term lease agreement effective April 1st, 2021 until March 31st, 2024 with the Coastal Hive at the Long Beach Airport at a rate of $1,398 per year plus GST and annual BCCPI increases.
Seconded by Rochelle. Thank you. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. The next item, 5D, that the West Coast Committee recommend that the Alberni-Clayoquot Board of Directors authorize Cascadia Air to operate a scheduled service at the Long Beach Airport. So that's Cascadia Air scheduled flights.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think questions can probably be directed through Mark, but I'll just give a quick summary. This proposal, Cascadia Air, I believe, came to the West Coast Committee about a year ago talking about this, and staff had moved to set up an agreement because it was tied to the Port Alberni Avra Airport. And in order to set up scheduled service there, it's much more challenging. So there would be definitely cost implications and staff implications. Whereas with the Long Beach Airport, it's very easy for us to establish a scheduled service because we are staffed and this is already happening. So the only thing that we really need to do to allow this to happen at the Long Beach Airport is just give them a letter authorizing them to operate scheduled service. And once they establish that and grow, then we can support them with whether it's setting up a lease for a kiosk or whatever supports if their scheduled service and business grows. Whereas with Abra, we really want to deal with that separately because it's quite different to be operating scheduled flights out of that airport because we do not have it and we do not have staff on site. So we were looking for the committee to recommend that the board issue the letter of authorization.
Do you have a motion to that effect? Rochelle?
Yeah, I can make the motion that the West Coast Committee recommend that the Alberni-Clackawas Board of Directors issue a letter authorizing Cascadia Air to operate scheduled service at Long Beach Airport.
Seconded. Tom, thank you. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. So ordered. Item 5E, a request for decision, bylaw R1033-2, tipping fee for rope and netting at the West Coast landfill. Jenny.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we had a very timely presentation and delegation at this meeting, which is wonderful. So Chloe and Alice spoke to the volunteer cleanup program that we have. And those materials are collected and processed through the raising of funds and grant opportunities. This report is specific to costs involved for the same materials, in essence, but this is produced by industry. So we've got rope and netting that would normally come to the landfill, and we would then put it into the active base and landfill it. Whereas because Ocean Legacy has set up the opportunity and the mechanism to recycle this kind of material, which really hasn't been done before, right? Because it is dirty, used plastic. So this is a project, as Chloe had shown, some great pictures of the challenge in recycling these materials. So they're working through the details of that, and we're very happy to be the receiver and diverter of that material. And we still need to find a way to fund that. And so we're not looking to raise grant money, and instead we want industry to fund the cost of that, which we would do for any diversion product, whether it be drywall or cardboard or any of the materials that we ban from landfilling, because there is now the technology and system in place to recycle it. So we had originally set a rate of $120 a ton because we just didn't know what it would cost because we haven't done it before. Now, in the last while that this program has been up and running, we've been looking at those costs. To date, it's expensive, but that happens when you start up any new process, and we're looking at it maybe costing about $190 a ton. So we want to raise the rate, but we want to, we'll continue to subsidize the costs for a little while because we think they're going to come down. So we're proposing that we raise the rate to $150 a ton, and then we revisit the rate in a year to see what the actual costs are. And I'm optimistic that they will be $150 a ton or maybe less. We're looking at finding more cost-effective transportation options, working with haulers for backhaul, as well as just as Ocean Legacy grows and finds more efficiencies, we know that their price for processing per ton is likely to reduce. So, and we want to continue to support this program, which is becoming very much a template for other communities in BC, and we're really supportive of the work that Ocean Legacy and Surfrider has started this program, and happy that we can work with them in industry on this as well.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jenny. And again, thanks to Chloe and Elise for their invaluable comments and updates on what's going on. As a community member myself and out at Salmon Beach, you could come out and probably get 100 tons of debris right there from all the people that have been collecting on the beaches out there. It's extremely valuable that we see this all cleaned up, blue barrels and whatever else there is. So anyway, I would like to make that motion that the West Coast Committee recommend that the Alberni-Clackawas Regional District Board of Directors approve the amended bylaw R1033-2 West Coast Landfill Tipping Fee and Regulation Amendment 2021. Seconded by Rochelle. Oh, go ahead, Tom. Sorry, you muted, Tom.
It's not coming. There we go. Thank you. I just had maybe a quick comment to Jenny, and I know we have Alice and Chloe there, but I'm just curious, under the DFO granting program, and it's a very long acronym that I won't put out. And I'm just wondering, within that program, if there's any chance of the understanding that there is cost shortfalls that are associated, and if there is opportunity to go back to the funding organization, the DFO long grant, to request further support in this initial pilot period program, understanding that these costs are still being worked out in the full understanding of the overall cost of the program, and that they are working towards reducing those costs on the ACRD end and at the Ocean Legacy end.
Through the chair, excellent point. So the good news is, with this huge funding announcement and all these different community groups that will be doing that, if they're looking to have this material recycled, which they all should and will be, we hope, they will be contacting Ocean Legacy directly to confirm that as part of their grant application. And so with each of those grants, what they'll be submitting, they'll be having to basically cover the cost of transportation and processing separately, or full cost recovery is what we're looking for. So whereas the landfill is more of a staging area for current industry that is doing regular stuff, not necessarily the cleanups, right? So the rate that we're looking at for 150 is really for industry, whereas the ocean cleanup materials, those do have to self-fund, and they do that through the grant funding. But yes, we also have recently tried to make sure that we're tackling that one, because we don't need to be subsidizing that when there is grant funding available.
Any other questions? All those in favor? Carried and so ordered. Thank you. Next item is item 5F, a request for decision, fire protection for the Port Albion area. And I see that Charlie's on the line, so maybe Charlie can give us an update. Thank you.
Good morning, all. Yeah, the question was brought up about a year ago about fire protection there for the Port Albion area, Sutton Road. As the report states, there's about 30 residents in that, and there is a water line that runs by there. The Ucluelet Volunteer Fire Brigade provides protection to Hitaku, so they drive past the area also on there. That being said, there are some limitations fire service might be provided there. The distance from Ucluelet would be a time thing. It's over 13 kilometers. So it really comes back to what the residents might be looking for, whether they're looking for the ability for the life safety aspect of it and putting the fire out and protecting the properties around them with some acceptable loss, or if they're looking to recover some costs and insurance rates, which is achievable, but at a much higher cost because of the equipment required to attain that. Ucluelet could do it, but it would be at a greatly increased cost. There's also no service area there, so that would have to be created too. So, is there any questions on that?
Rochelle.
I have a question probably for Mr. Holmes. I'm wondering if what other areas in Area C that are in close proximity do or do not have fire protection from Ucluelet. And I don't know about the Tofino end of things, but as we move over there, I know that with the Itatsu agreement, it was also added into it that they would go there for smoke or fire and not for the typical, say, ambulance assist, that where we may need help, i.e. on the highway with extrication, or if it were even a lift assist or an extrication from a home, where is at the request of the ambulance chief, that would be me, that I could then request, and it was covered under that agreement, that the Ucluelet Fire Department would send some response for these items that weren't necessarily smoke or fire. and that it wouldn't obviously be the whole brigade with all the equipment, but they would send what was necessary for that request. And so A, if we were considering such, if we would consider that also, and B, what other clusters of homes are currently vulnerable that don't have an agreement in place?
Mr. Chair, I think the rest of the area does not have an agreement, save and except for we have agreements with both Tofino and Ucluelet with respect to the airport. And I think if we make the call with respect to a fire at the airport, I think both departments, as quick as they can, start driving towards the airport. They do that under our agreement, and we've revamped those agreements. I think a year or two ago, something like that. So I think that's it for Area C, and yeah, unless anybody can think of something else.
We
Save
also
and accept it. Go ahead,
South
Wendy.
Long Beach, yeah, South Long Beach,
South Long Beach.
Fire Protection Service Area. It's another area that we have service area, South Long Beach. Charlie could probably speak to it.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, South Long Beach, just to the north of the area that's in question. I'm not sure what's there for residents or how much property is there, but it is a little closer to Ucluelet for that protection.
So that would, Millstream, where does Millstream fall into that? Are they all good there?
Millstream, I believe, is currently unprotected also.
So I guess my question would be, if we are considering Sutton Road and Smithdale Road and everything out before you get to Itatsu, that we have to drive right past Millstream, and there's water there and there's all those things there. So are we considering an agreement with Millstream? Because there's lots of houses there. I don't know the population.
Yeah, that question was brought.
Can't hear you.
Include all those areas over there. And that would be part of the thing that would be raised and looked at as we went through with this.
Thanks for that. So just to clear things up a little bit, I'm the one that put this request in for fire protection. This issue for me principally is life safety. And I was under the impression that that there was an agreement in place for Millstream area, but clearly it's not. So yeah, I think it's extremely important. I know that the agreement in place with Hitatsu and the Ucluelet Nation, that they are responding to that. There is a water line that goes right by there. And my thought was that the inclusion of a fire hydrant on Sutton Road would be a water source that they currently don't have. Mr. Holmes.
Sure. I think a couple of people are clamoring to clarify that the South Long Beach is the Millstream area. Is
Okay.
that?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Now we can. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, Millstream is included in the South
In the
Long
South
Beach
Long
fire
Beach.
protection area, so they do have fire protection. So we're looking at adding Port Albion as another
Yeah.
service area.
It only makes sense to me that if your fire trucks are driving right by, potentially to the Ucluelet First Nation, then the inclusion of a water supply, which would probably be helpful for them as well, and that is a hydrant in that location. So anyway, any other further comments or questions? Seeing none, do I have a motion? Go ahead, Rochelle.
Yeah, I can make the motion that the West Coast Committee recommend that the ACRD Board of Directors, that ACRD staff be directed to engage with the District of Ucluelet and the Ucluelet Volunteer Fire Brigade and the Ucluelet First Nations in discussions to explore the feasibility of providing fire protection to the Port Albion area.
Second.
And I should probably say that I'm not in conflict, but that's where all of my husband's family lives, including Mr. Smith, who was earlier on the call, lives on Sutton and Smithdale Road. But anyways, sorry.
Kelly, you're muted.
Thank you, Heather. That motion is carried. Thank you very much. Finally, item 6, reports. The first report is the West Coast Compost Pilot 2020 report. And Jenny.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is just a report talking about the West Coast pilot project that we've done for composting, which has been excellent. They've diverted a significant amount of material and learned quite a few lessons, and it is laying the foundation for us in moving to the next phase, which will be the design and construction of the larger organics processing facility at the West Coast landfill. We're hoping we actually aren't going to be able to make it back to the West Coast Committee. We're going to go direct to the board with a recommendation for award for the RFP. It just closed on Monday, so we'll be reviewing those proposals and providing a recommendation to move forward. Hopefully that will result in construction starting mid to late summer and allow us to have residential curbside collection basically in place. We're hoping 2022, 1 year from now. So that is all very good. We're moving forward very quickly on that.
Thanks for that, Jenny. It's really important, the whole composting project for the West Coast, and much appreciated. Thank you for all the work on that. Next one is item 6B, the West Coast Transit update. Terry or Jenny, go ahead.
I can speak to this one, Mr. Chair. Oh, sorry, Jenny. I think I've just jumped the gun. I think your report about where we're at is first, and then we'll talk about the parts.
I was really eager to be like, sure, go for it. But this report is just an update on where we're doing with transit. I know it came up at the last West Coast Committee meeting. So there was a meeting on Friday with stakeholder groups talking about West Coast Transit. Essentially, the biggest challenge that they run into is finding a place for buses to be maintained. So they are going to be issuing a new request for expression of interest to see if there is something available, someone who's interested in, and also looking at potentially smaller buses. So with the option of medium-sized bus or small bus being implemented, the service could theoretically start a little bit earlier than next summer, meaning next spring. So there's still a lot of details to work out, and we can expect to have a request for expression of interest out this month, we're hoping.
Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. Just because there's often a lot of questions around. So the anticipated, so there is an RFP out for that, for the maintenance and storage area, and I know for the actual bus design itself. Is that correct?
Close. It's going to be a request for expression of interest because to see exactly what's going to happen. And because we know it doesn't already exist. So a lot of it is anyone interested or proposing maybe some creative solutions for that.
Okay. And if everything were to go well, then expected service delivery of roughly summer of 2022.
Yes, and because of the challenge just with finding maintenance on the West Coast, it is very likely that it will start with a smaller bus. Until then, the infrastructure can become in place so that we could upgrade to larger buses. There's more flexibility with small buses in the fleet throughout BC. So there's a lot of benefits to that. But that is not the firm path yet, but that is definitely the alternative that is being looked at.
And just in terms that may also be valuable in understanding what the service delivery might be in terms of numbers of people involved. And if we start big, might be a bit more expensive than starting at maybe a smaller scale. Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none. Thank you again, Jenny. Much appreciated. The last item under reports is the West Coast Transit Service portions of Area C withdrawal options. And who's going to address
this is
that?
mine to take. Sure. So at the February 17th Committee of the Whole meeting, Director Roberts brought this topic up with a question about how we would go about potentially withdrawing some portions of Area C. So Wendy Thompson, the GM of Administrative Services, and I have looked into this with the ministry. It's not something we have actually done before. So we've kind of outlined what the steps would be in order to undertake this process. It definitely would be a little bit of work, starting with identifying the areas that potentially the director would like removed. And then we'd have to figure out the cost impacts of that. This service being apportioned not just on land and improvements, but also on population will add another little wrinkle into how we might possibly be able to do this. Once we determine what the area is, we have to figure out the value of that area, because we have to adjust the limits in the bylaw so that the tax rate limit in the bylaw, which is 0.294 per thousand, it would therefore be adjusted based on the new total taxable value of the service area. So definitely some work involved, and we just provided this report for information and look for direction from the committee if you would like to kind of proceed along this path. And we did, under options considered at the end of the report, give a proposed motion if you are interested.
Yeah, thanks for that, Terry. Just to elaborate on that, the portion of Area C, the withdrawal option, would be Salmon Beach. And I've been getting calls on it, and the rationale behind it is that from the junction to Salmon Beach is 30 kilometers, 12 kilometers of paved highway, and just under or approximately 20 kilometers on gravel forest road. So the request by individuals there, that's 360 properties, and I've been, as I mentioned, I've been getting phone calls on that, and to rethink it took a lot for me, because I support transit service on the West Coast, but I would really like to follow through with the withdrawal of Area C, of that portion of Area C, is Salmon Beach. Any other comments? Tom?
Yeah, and I don't know if it was clearly identified in the sense of the ability, and I think Ms. Fong alluded to it a little bit, but the ability to withdraw a very specific portion of the electoral area C, as we know that, for example, Millstream and other areas that would benefit from that transit service. So I was unclear if that ability to take just that small portion of Area C that we're talking about, if that is a reality. And I may have missed it. You may have already said it, and I might have to repeat yourself, but that was the one question I did have in terms of that withdrawal of that specific portion.
If I can respond, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead. Yes.
Yes, we definitely can. We can do it. So when I'm requisitioning funds from an entire area, it just, all those amounts kind of get lumped together and passed onto the surveyor of taxes to be put onto someone's property tax bills. When we're not doing a fully defined area, so all of electoral area C, we actually need BC assessment to basically draw a map of what this service area boundary would be, and then to create that on the tax roll. So in order for this to be done, it could not be done for 2021 because there are some steps involved in defining what this service area is, because it's not the whole electoral area. So it can, yes, it can be done.
And if you, Rochelle, if you don't mind, I just have a quick follow up. And would there be the ability at that time to also be able to give it a financial understanding of what the implications to the other participants in that service area, what those financial ramifications might be to each of, like, the district of Tofino and Ucluelet and the remainder of Area C that would be involved in the service?
Definitely, yes, that would be part of what we were unsure of. Was when we watched it back, there was a mention of a couple of other areas by Director Roberts, so we needed to first define exactly what area, and now that it's clear it's just the Salmon Beach area that he's considering, if you guys make this motion, we can come back with the financial impacts not only to Area C but also to the other areas. Yes.
Thank you.
Rochelle, go ahead.
So I'm going to start by stating the obvious. I think it's the obvious, is that what you're saying is that the people from Salmon Beach would never utilize the transit system because they're not going to spend all their time going on that crappy road and then the rest of the good road to then park and get on a bus to do the last small leg, so that it would never be of interest to them to utilize the service. And then and I'm not saying that I don't disagree with that, but I do want to put on top of that, so that's a geographical, that's based on geography and time and distance. There's also a whole bunch of people, because I should have vetted a whole bunch of conversations when this was going down, was that there are people right here in Ucluelet who straight up will never be utilizing that service. And that may be because of because they're fortunate enough to have enough family to always take care of them for whatever reasons. So I guess I can see there being certain people who say they will never use it and will never use it in that situation because it's geography, and people who are right here in the community who say they will never use it and probably will never use it. So I'm just saying that, but I don't disagree with that Salmon Beach shouldn't be considered as being excluded from it. But I just wanted to just make that point.
Yeah, thanks for that. Just 1 second, Mr. Holmes. And you're absolutely right. The issue, I think, for Salmon Beach residents is if the service was available to them in a closer proximity, well, I don't see any transit buses heading out Barclay, Maine or the other road. So yeah, absolutely. For the Salmon Beach residents that I've spoken to, traveling to Ucluelet or Tofino is going the clearest route available and driving in to do their shopping and so on and so forth. So the utilization of transit for them is really a moot point. Just 1 second, Michelle. Mr. Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hesitate to get into sort of this part of the conversation, but I do know that the board is instructed us to undertake a bit of a study to try to understand inter-regional transit and sort of broadening the connectivity, particularly as the business model isn't supporting the private contractor at this time during the pandemic. The ridership is so low that it's not feasible economically to continue to lose money month after month for the operator. So then the conversation about, well, is there some sort of participation that local government could or might have or advocate for, et cetera. And what that really speaks to is sort of the social aspects of this. And we've got a lot of services that are supported by the broader areas that aren't either available to or else used by many people. And things like 911, hopefully there's people that go their entire life without ever dialing 911, yet they'll pay for it monthly on their property taxes, et cetera. Some of the conversations that were happening a couple of years ago, when this is a year ago, maybe when this was being talked about, maybe 15 months ago, when this was being talked about, was really the social aspects of it as well, for people to be able to age in place, et cetera. So that doesn't answer the very legitimate concerns that are being raised about Salmon Beach's ability to use this. So because this service, but the whole regional district system has an element of what's good for the many, and which doesn't necessarily speak to what's good for everyone or benefits everyone, and drawing a direct line between the cost and the benefit to a service. So I just didn't want to lose track of that part of the conversation in this piece, because I think that again, while I hesitate to insert myself in this part of the conversation, it's really up to the elected officials to decide who benefits and who doesn't from a service. That's really critical in establishing these, and through that conversation at the elected level, articulating who best to be paying for particular services. But I just caution about getting too surgical on too many services, because we could go service by service and talk about who's likely to benefit from a particular service and who in turn might not be. So anyway, thanks for allowing me to present that part of it, Mr. Chair.
Michelle, go ahead.
What Mr. Holmes just said just before he said it, brought me back to what I said to the people who came to me in the community. I don't need that. I'll never use it. Why should I pay for it? And my response was, this is a community, and sometimes we need to make sure what's best for the greater whole. And how fortunate are you that you don't have to get on the bus, and you won't ever have to get on the bus. But many people will benefit from this in the community. And in the long haul, like Mr. Holmes said, it is about having people being able to remain in the community and age out and past when they have a driver's license and medical help. And we still have the hospitals still in Tofino, and the list goes on. So I do think that it would be a luxury to not have to use it, but we have a responsibility to the community to all participate in things for the greater good.
And thanks for that, Rochelle and Mr. Holmes. And I appreciate that. There are a lot of services that the communities pay for, including schools. We don't have any schools going out, any kids going to school out there. So, that's another item. We pay a lot in taxes. We pay for road improvements and so on and so forth. And in this particular instance, I don't believe that there's, and according to the information that I'm getting from people out there, that there's any value with regards to transit service for the residents out in that area. And that's my comment. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I didn't want to get involved with the conversation around the social impacts and everything, because I think it opens up a larger can of worms that I had to deal with on the district of Tofino end of things. I do support very, very much Director Coles and Mr. Holmes's point of view on this. And I struggled with this a little bit in terms of the ability even to support the motion that is brought before us. And that's why my questions were directed more about what the actual recommendation of the motion was, which was to provide the information around the financial impacts of removing that. I think it would be important to, at some point, if we are going to proceed with this motion, that conversation around the larger context of what those services that we provide. And I'm learning that as a new member to the ACRD board, about how we take that larger context of providing multiple services and we spread that cost around the region. And I think it's an important conversation to continually have. So I was having difficulty in the ability to support the motion, and that's because of those social impacts. But looking at the direct recommendation of it, what it would provide is some information, but it would also have to be in context of those other issues that have been brought up here in this conversation. So I don't know what this will lead to in terms of the supporting of the recommendation moving forward, but I just thought that I had to bring that out, that I see there's almost two separate issues here, but they have to be looked at together in essence to make I think the most appropriate decision in this case. I don't know if that confuses everything, but
yeah, thanks for that, Tom. Rochelle, go ahead, Rochelle.
Sorry, one more thing. I want to use the word fulsome, so it would be a fulsome approach, because that's something Tom and I talked about as being a catchword. But I think that one of the things that was very clear when we're talking about the social impact of it is that people who own several properties and maybe businesses, and because the tax is, so then they're paying on many levels and will never use it, was sort of more of a real bite for some people. And to which I just said, well, it's very fortunate that you have all these properties. But that was definitely an impact, where the people who had maybe more, which would never need it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. There is an issue. I know that there are people from the Ucluelet that own property at Salmon Beach. It's their getaway spot, and also from Tofino. And just to bring you up to date, besides paying provincial taxes, the residents of Salmon Beach also pay a parcel tax, which covers everything that goes on out there, no matter what's being done, roads, sanitary issues, and all the rest of it. So that's just food for thought. And I'll leave it at that. And the recommendation is that the West Coast Committee receive reports A to C for information. Do I have a seconder? Rochelle, thank you. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Late business. Is there any other late business?
There isn't any other late business, but I don't know if I needed to make a motion to have the information come back about the trees and all of that. There was no motion made. Do I need to make one about the Christmas trees?
Mr. Chair, I think Jenny dealt with that earlier on, that the conversation will take place and a report will come forward from whatever comes out of that conversation.
So I don't have to say anything else about that.
It's not necessary. I don't think
Perfect.
so.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that. No further late business. Question period. The questions or comments from the public participating in the Zoom meeting. Is there anything at all there, Janice or Wendy?
Mr. Chair, there's no participants participating today from the public, and no questions were received at our email link.
Thank you very much. Item number 9, we're moving to the in-camera portion to close the meeting to the public as per the community charter sections I-90 sub 1 sub J. Information that is prohibited or information that if were presented in a document would be prohibited from disclosure under section 21 FOIPA 21(1) sub C sub I of FOIPA. The head of a public body must refuse to disclose to an applicant information, the disclosure of which could reasonably be expected to harm significantly the competitive position or interfere significantly with negotiating position of the party. Wendy, is everybody clear of this?
Yes, and I just wanted to confirm, Mr. Chair, we did ask to move one of the items 3B, Devon Transport, for discussion in camera. So this section of the community charter applies for that report to be considered in camera. So we just need a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Rochelle.
Second.